geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic book fans from all over the world, my dominant herons, senors and senoritas, gats and gittens, all welcome to another fabulous, intellectually challenging episode of Ask Chuck Dixon Take 2. Yeah, I had some audio problems, as many of you pointed out to me, so we're going to do a take 2 here. So it's going to be all different, all new, and hopefully all interesting. But you'll be able to hear it better. Apparently, my new computer decided that it didn't want to use my super expensive deluxe microphone that I spent a bunch of money for, and instead opted to go with my webcam microphone, which, as anyone who listened to this week's episode before I took it down, you know that audio sucked. And apparently that's been the culprit behind a lot of my recent videos having audio that sucks. So anyway, enough of that. I've apologized. I am contrite. I am sorry. And we're going to do this all over again because I don't want to cheat you folks who send in questions out of cogent answers to those questions. And of course, they're going to be slightly different because I don't have a script. Michael Partika. In Ask Chuck Dixon 257, you gave us a taste of the Philadelphia accent, dialect, and food culture. Have you ever had to adapt your writing to, or better yet, invent a fictional American city's accent, dialect, food culture, etc.? For example, Gotham, Bloodhaven, or Flora Spark. I always thought of Gotham as New York City. New York City is sometimes referred to as Gotham. I think that Bob Kane and Bill Finger, who I believe were New York natives at the time, I think they thought of New York as the setting for the Batman stories. And if you're a New Yorker, New York is your entire world. There's New York and there's the rest of the world, and only New York matters. So, as a writer, and I'm not the only one, I think we simply assume we're just going to write these characters as New Yorkers with, phrasing and vocabulary and lexicon. And I generally don't write dialects. I don't like writing accents. So I've never done that. But of course, certain phraseology, certain ways of saying things are typical to New York. Like, when you're going to tear someone a new one and you go, not for nothing, but which is New York version of with all due respect. Things like that, can slip in and be perfectly at home in Gotham City. So, not a lot of heavy lifting there. For Bloodhaven, I always thought about New Jersey. I always thought Bloodhaven is in northern New Jersey. And, slight difference in the way people talk, very slight. Some phraseology that's more at home in North Jersey. Now, for Flora Spark in Texas, and of course this is taking place in a parallel universe, but it still has to reflect Texas. But much like our real life Texas, where tons of people have moved to Texas from California and Washington State and Arizona, and New Mexico, and Colorado, and Oregon. And they've transplanted to Texas because of its friendlier environment toward freedom of speech, the Second Amendment, and, lower taxes. No income tax, no state income tax. I mean, you move to Texas, give yourself a 20% raise. Anyway, so you can mix things in, and I don't have anybody. Again, I don't want to do accents. I don't want to try to mock the Texan accent in the dialogue, but there's certain phraseology. And years ago, I bought a terrific book called Texas Crude, and it was filled with phrases that are. I bought it 30 years ago, so some of these phrases are probably out of date. But at least it had phrases and vocabulary and a lexicon of words used in Texas but not used anywhere else, and how they refer to things. I mean, the question of, do you call it soda or do you call it pop? And these are all regional things that you have to pay attention to. But like I said, there's so many transplants to Texas, it doesn't need to be an issue. It's more Texas attitude I want to get across. I mean, it's much like Florida. I live in Florida. I've lived here for, 20 years, more than 20 years. And I'm not a native Floridian, but you meet native Floridians, but it's rare. It's an endangered species because the population of the state has exploded. And it's all people from, the Northeast and Chicago and places like that. And so, you don't meet a lot of native Floridians. So it's not that big a deal writing about Texas. And, in general, you want to capture the flavor of the language of a particular region, but you have to be a good listener. You have to listen, to what people say. You don't want to listen to TV and movie. Whenever possible, you want to try to meet people from as many different areas as you can, and just pick stuff up, and put it back in the old file drawers in your mind in case you ever wrote a character who was from Maine or from Quebec or from Puerto Rico, and try to remember, what did they sound like? What did they say? Anything unique that I can use here? I discussed earlier how, in Philadelphia, and I think in a lot of northeastern cities, there's a lot of Irish phrasing that remains, and it remains as part of the way that we phrase sentences in those areas, and we're not even aware we do it. My wife, who was, mostly raised in Nashville, a lot of her family's from Arkansas. She always wonders when I add "and all" to the end of a sentence, and it's like the Irish version of "etc." And I'm not even conscious that I do it, but I do it all the time. I may have even done it on this video already. I'm not sure. But it's a holdover from Irish. And so many of the things we say and that we don't understand the derivation. We don't understand the genealogy of a lot of the phrases that we say. I didn't see hide nor hair of him. Where does that come from? 6 of one, half a dozen of another. A phrase that my grandmother would use often. She's a Philadelphia native. If you had to walk a long distance from where you parked your car to the place you were going, you would say, I parked back to where Christ left his sandals. So you got to wonder who's the first person who said that. So, things like that. Plus, you can invent a lot of patois and argot and jargon. It's fiction, after all. Jason Shepard. The recent passing of Robert Redford got me thinking about movie stars. It used to be that an actor's star power played a huge part in a film's success, instead of relying on franchises or big concept ideas. People would go see a movie just because this actor or actress was in it. Who was your favorite movie star? And you're right. I mean, once upon a time, if Elizabeth Taylor was in a movie, my mom and my aunt had to see it. I mean, didn't matter what it was about. They had to see it. And I grew up with, John Wayne movies. You want to see a John, you would say, where you going to the movies tonight? What are you going to go see? I'm going to go see a John Wayne movie. You didn't have to get the title. There was the title make. It's a John Wayne movie. It's going to be John Wayne being John Wayne, and and that was it. It's you really. I can't think of any star now that you wouldn't say we're going to a Ryan Gosling movie. He's like, because that could be anything. He could be an astronaut or a chipmunk. It's not. Maybe like Keanu Reeves is maybe the last guy like that. I can't think of too many guys. Jackie Chan. But these are all guys are not young. I can't think of any young actors who have made an impression in that way. So anyway, about Robert Redford. Now Robert Redford became a movie star. I mean, there's no arguing that. He's huge, international big star, and but he wasn't always a big star. And he became a big star in the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and how that happened was because of writing. So the writers get they get a win here. Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid was originally supposed to star Paul Newman and Steve McQueen. This was going to be the first teaming of the two most popular stars in the world. And it was going to be a big deal. And it was going to have to make a lot of money. And the studio was like really high on these two being together in a movie. Well, McQueen backed out for one reason or another. And probably on advice of his wife. And because he always listened to his wife. And in casting, and 99% of the time she was right. I think she was wrong on this one, but 99% of the time she was right. So anyway, they needed to replace Steve McQueen. Well, who are you going to replace him with? There wasn't anybody. There wasn't anybody who was right for this role that you could drop in who had the star power of Paul Newman. And the studio really wanted that star power thing. You know, this chemistry between two big Hollywood idols. And well, they reached out for Robert Redford. Now, Robert Redford was known to audiences. They probably didn't know his name. He had been in movies. He'd been in A pictures, some big movies. But he was generally seen as like a character actor, even though, he's, Hollywood handsome kind of guy. Did a lot of TV. Did my favorite episode of The Untouchables. He was a guest star on that. He did a lot of TV, did a lot of movies, some successful, some not. He's never in a big hit. And in fact, he was in a number of Hollywood bombs. Not that you can blame that on him. But, he was a face audiences knew, but they didn't really know his name. So the studio turns to the producers and said, if you're going to use this guy, you got to turn him into a movie star. You got to, in the course of this movie, he has to become a movie star. He has to become equal with Paul Newman in status. And so they turned to the screenwriter, William Goldman. They said, what, could you do that? How are we going to do that? And Goldman had an idea. And so they added a sequence to the beginning of the film. And it's a card playing sequence. And it's shot with, the shots are tightly composited to just show the hands of the card players. And we hear their voices, the conversation around the card table, off screen. We don't see the actors. And in the course of events in this opening sequence, one of the players accuses another of cheating. And then another says, well, I wouldn't be calling that guy cheating. I'm not paraphrasing the dialogue here. I wouldn't accuse that guy of cheating. And he says, why not? And he goes, because that's the Sundance Kid. And then the guy who accused of cheating, you can hear, he's hesitant now. He's made a big mistake. Now, audiences watching this are like, well, who's this Sundance Kid guy? In this little bit of dialogue, we're already really super curious. Who's Sundance Kid? And why is he such a badass? Why is he such a name to be reckoned with? And then we get a shot of Newman, or not Newman, we get a shot of Robert Redford looking over his cards. And he's the Sundance Kid. And boom, Robert Redford is a movie star. Because that scene set him up, made the audience curious about him. So when the first time you see his face, you're never going to forget it. Because of that very subtle, very nuanced build-up to his image. And so, for the rest of the film, he is on an equal par with Paul Newman. No question. They both own that movie together. And, and probably part of it, Paul Newman's generosity. Actors can be generous to other actors. And they had a true chemistry. So, and audiences picked up on that. And of course, it was an enormous, enormous hit. And went on to be like a iconic Western film. Now, as far as actors that I really like, James Stewart comes to mind immediately. And I'm basing, who I like as an actor based on talent, not charisma or anything else. Jimmy Stewart had a range unlike any other actor ever. Very few actors throughout the history of cinema had the range that Jimmy Stewart had. He could be the romantic lead. He could be, a troubled soul. He could be the lost soul in a film noir movie. He could be a rage-fueled psycho, like he was in a number of the westerns that he made. And he's a guy that started out in light comedy and romance. And, he made a name for himself. Wasn't a big star prior to World War II, but he certainly was someone audiences recognized. And largely a character actor, not always in the lead in the films he was in, but he made a number of terrific movies in that period. Shop Around the Corner, The Mortal Storm. He appears in one of the Thin Man movies. Does a great freak out in that movie. But largely he's seen as just the affable boy next door type. And he goes to World War II, and he volunteers for service. He enlists against the studio wishes, and eventually becomes a bomber pilot over Europe. Now, if you know anything about the air war in World War II, the attrition rate of our aviators over Europe doing daylight bombing raids, it is horrific. It is horrific. The number of losses, the percentage of guys who never came back. And Stewart flies like 50 missions, which is, whoa. That's a lot of time in the air. That's a lot of time in danger. And he sees horrible stuff. Sees just horrific things happening. But, he holds it together, and he is well respected by his men. He's seen as a lucky pilot because he makes it back alive every time. But he's seen really, really horrible things happen. And he comes back traumatized. And he has PTSD, and it's bad. I mean, he is, for all intents and purposes, psychologically broken. But he's like, well, what am I going to do now? And he's not getting a lot of offers because, like I said, he wasn't a big star. And a lot of stars suffered this after World War II. If they weren't a huge star, nobody was really knocking on the door after World War II because they were seen as, he's from that period and we're into a new period now. So he gets approached by Frank Capra, director, producer, writer, to do It's a Wonderful Life. And Capra explains the whole movie to him, and Stewart says, in later interviews, said, I didn't understand a word he said. I just knew I needed work. So I said yes. So he says yes. Now he's not really ready. He has not recovered from the horrible stuff he saw in World War II. And he's a damaged man. And Frank Capra, like so many directors, cruelly uses that. He uses the fact that Stewart is a little frayed at the edges. If you ever see It's a Wonderful Life, you can see that. And in It's a Wonderful Life, you see Stewart's full range. He's sort of a little bit of a goofball here, but he's the charming romantic lead here. He's the stolid family man here and the loyal friend and all the rest. And then you see him impassioned about his business when he confronts Mr. Potter, and there's this real passion there. He's drawing back like from when he made Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, this passion and this frustration at the corruption that he sees. And then in his darkest moments when he's suicidal and he's in that bar, and he's at the bar and he's falling apart. We see him falling apart on screen, and he's obviously drawing consciously or unconsciously on his World War II experiences and the horrible things he's seen. And then he goes from that to being, elated and, touched by the kindness of all of his friends. I mean, it's just an incredible performance, and it's typical of Stewart that he can do it all. It's one of the things, that movie is one of the things that put him in the mind of directors. It's a Wonderful Life made no money when it was first released. It was an enormous bomb. It didn't make any money. But directors saw it and thought, well, this guy can do it all. So he ends up in a series of very successful westerns with Anthony Mann at Universal, in which he plays kind of really edgy character And in each film, he's more and more edgy. And Mann really brings that out in him. And then, of course, Hitchcock gloms onto him. And Hitchcock uses him as, basically a straight man in the man who, the man who knew too much. But then delves deeper in Rear Window, where he's, a little bit morally conflicted in Rear Window. And then finally Vertigo, in which Jimmy Stewart plays the full-bore film noir main character who is a victim of fate. Just helpless against the things going on around him. And Stewart is so good in that role. He is so good in that role. And would continue on to be in movies and television and a big star. But, he's probably my favorite. I'll watch anything he's in because his performances are absolutely fascinating. Now, on the female side, Barbara Stanwyck. She's like Jimmy Stewart. She could do it all. She could be the romantic lead. She could be the sympathetic mom character. She could be the tough guy. She could be the toughest person in a tough guy movie. And of course the ultimate film noir femme fatale. So, and she, was great in these weepy women's pictures that they used to make. And she's terrific in them. And she could do everything. I mean, she could shoot, she could ride, she could do all that stuff. And like I said, her range was tremendous. There wasn't any role too challenging for her to leap into. If it was, period film, modern, whatever. She could do it. She was also very involved in the creative end of film. She would critique screenplays. She would critique some of the direction. It wasn't all look at me, I'm so important. It was all to make sure that her performance was part of a whole. That she was bringing to the picture what it needed, and nothing more, and nothing less. And consummate professional. If you search online, there's some incredible letters she wrote to students at a drama school and to TV producers and stuff like that, basically giving her point of view on whatever it was that they were working on at the time. But just intelligent and vastly talented, and an actress who could immerse herself, disappear into a role. Which is, the goal. Now, for movie stars, Clint Eastwood, the top of the list. Clint Eastwood, against all odds, I used to watch him on Rawhide when I was a kid, and against all odds, he became not only one of our biggest movie stars, but also one of our most important filmmakers from a directing standpoint. And another guy like Barbara Stanwyck, immersed himself in the filmmaking process. He wanted to know how every job was done, from the cameraman to the sets to the electrician to the stuntman. If you've ever watched Rawhide, it's about a cattle drive, and there's a lot of B-roll that they cut to of cattle being driven. A lot of the stuff was shot on sound stages and backlots, but then they would insert this B-roll to remind you that this is a show about a cattle drive. They're driving them cattle. Here's them cattle they were talking about. And in the B-roll, you'll see the stuntman that they obviously sent out with a second unit each season to shoot new footage of guys, droving cattle. And you'll see the stuntmen riding and everything else. And riding among them, almost every time, you'll see Clint. You won't see any of the other principals. You won't see Eric Fleming or any of the other guys. You only see Clint most times, because he would go out there with the second unit and ride with the stuntman because he wanted to see what was that all about. And that's the sign of a consummate professional. And of course, he's also a terrific actor, but I think he gets dismissed as an actor because he's so freaking iconic that he can't make you forget he's Clint Eastwood. As good as he is, when you're watching a movie, you buy him as the character and you believe it, and he sells the story well. But there's not a second of screen time where you forget this is Clint Eastwood, which, is a blessing and a curse, I guess. you're a huge movie star because there's something about you. You have that it that made you popular and made you successful and made people want to sit and watch you for 2 hours. But on the flip side, nobody's ever going to forget who you are, and you're never going to win, an acting award because we just can't forget who you are. But I've seen every Clint Eastwood movie. I've even the good and the bad, and I'm always interested by the choices he makes and what he decides to be in, and even when I don't agree with it, and things he decides to make, and he's still apparently in pre-production now on a movie. Guy's in his 90s, keeps on keeping on. Now on the flip side of Clint Eastwood, you got Gene Hackman. And Gene Hackman can disappear in the role and make you forget he's Gene Hackman, which is weird because he's actually Gene Hackman in every movie. He's so good that he doesn't seem to ever be acting. He just seems to be himself, but he isn't. He's bringing the full emotional weight and drama and everything to it. I read a thing by David Mamet, who directed him in the movie Heist. And a Mamet dialogue is not easy. A lot of actors can't do it justice. Mamet's dialogue is almost like it has a meter. It's like a throwback to Elizabethan drama sometimes. It has odd phraseology and vocabulary, and it's mannered. And while I think it's wonderful, I think it's great stuff, it's difficult for actors to sell it as spontaneous. That they're not acting, that they just thought of this thing, which is what a great actor does. Makes you think, hey, they didn't memorize these lines. He's actually saying stuff that's in his heart, in his head. That's what a great actor does. Well, Hackman, of all the actors who have, been in Mamet productions, Hackman he just sold those lines. He's just tossing those lines off and making them totally believable, not drawing any attention to the writing, serving the story, which is what it's supposed to do. And he's up against some stiff competition. Al Pacino, Jack Lemmon, Val Kilmer, all these terrific actors who have in the past been in Mamet productions. And here's Gene Hackman, man. He's just running with it. And Mamet said when he was directing Heist that, they're between scenes and Hackman's on his spot where the next scene's going to begin, and he's talking to the makeup person, he's talking to the lighting person, he's just talking, blah, 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 having a conversation. Mamet says action. Hackman starts reading his lines, saying his lines, and Mamet's like, wait a minute. He's not acting. He sounds exactly the same now as he did when he was talking to the electrician. He's not giving me his best. He's phoning it in. He's not even working here. He's just reading the lines. And then he watched the dailies. He watched the film shot that day, and he realized, oh my God, this guy's a genius. He never looks like he's acting. And that's the greatest thing you can say about an actor. Like the greatest thing you can say about a writer is, I read the story, I just forgot that someone had written it. Yeah, okay, yeah. Invisible hand writing, invisible hand acting. So yeah, Hackman is a guy I will watch in anything he's in. Fascinating and intense. Now, a guy I can't get away from mentioning, Ernest Borgnine. And I mentioned Borgnine because here's another guy at range. Heavy drama, comedy, whatever the tone of your film was, Borgnine would rise or fall to match it. And of all, I'm getting older. The celebrities that I like, Clint Eastwood's the only one I mentioned so far. It's still with us. The movie stars that I grew up with, they're passing. They're passing in droves. Most of them are gone, including Borgnine. And, you read it in the paper and you get a little sad. Like, oh, I remember that guy's movies or that woman's films, and I really enjoyed them. And I'm going to miss not seeing her. And I hope that they had a happy life and all the rest of it, all the thoughts we have of goodwill toward, famous people that, we've come to know I use the term no loosely here. But when Borgnine passed, and he passed like 92 or 93, and he had been appearing on TV like right up until the day he died. He'd been in, and he was sharp, and he was with it, and he was funny. He's promoting a book, and I really like seeing him and everything else. And then I heard he passed, and I was really sad, really, really, really sad. It wasn't like, okay, in the midst of life we are, whatever. Really sad. And I wondered, why is Ernest Borgnine's death affecting me this way? And I realized because he was probably an actor I'd known all my life. He'd been in everything. And, and he'd been in McHale's Navy, which I loved as a kid. I never missed McHale's Navy. And I always wondered, I knew he was a big movie star, big actor, character actor, and everything else, appeared in huge productions, big hit movies. And here he is on this really, really silly service comedy show. And I remember even thinking as a kid, well, his career's over. Nobody's ever going to see him as a dramatic actor after this, because this show it's silly. And I realized that as a kid it was silly, but that's what I loved about it. And I remember my dad like rolling his eyes whenever I would watch it because it was so silly. But then he was a Hogan's Heroes fan, so he had no room to complain. Anyway, and then of course Borgnine comes back. He leaves McHale's Navy and he goes right back to his dramatic acting career. He was up for The Godfather, for God's sake. And but I think that's why it affected me, because he was in so many things I liked as a child and as an adult. He's just like one of those familiar faces, one of those welcome faces. You're trying to decide what movie to watch, and you see that name, and you go, yeah, I'll give that a chance. Borgnine's in it. I want to see that. I want to see him in that scene. So there you go. And like I said, everybody but Clint in my list is gone, so I can't. There's not really any current actors that will drive me to watch something just because they're in it, because. And obviously I'm not alone, because there's only a few big stars that can add marquee value to a movie anymore. And even they're starting to fade away. I mean, The Rock and Chris Pratt, they're not filling the seats like they used to. They're not bringing in the numbers on streaming like they used to. Will Smith, after The Slap, I mean, that ended him as a big mover and shaker. He was the most bankable star in Hollywood history. Tom Cruise, his last couple of Mission Impossible movies tanked at the box office. So maybe that whole era is over. But then, some guy could pop up, or gal could pop up next week, and we all got to change our mind. Anyway, there you go. Jason Shepard, again. Why did I not give you a spin? Your quadruple spin graphic features the Eagle from Space 1999 TV show in the 1970s. Are you a Space 1999 fan? Personally, I really enjoy the show. I prefer the 2001 gravitas of Season 1, but I also like the Lost in Space insanity of Season 2. It straddles the cultural divide between Star Trek and Star Wars, and I just dig it. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of sci-fi on TV, and this show, popped up in syndication, and I never missed an episode. I really dug it. I liked it a lot. It showed on Friday nights in Philly, which is a terrible night for a science fiction show to be on. The list of science fiction shows that got canceled on Friday nights is legion. From Star Trek, Planet of the Apes, Kolchak, The Night Stalker. I could go on and on and on. The science fiction, Friday nights was not a good night for science fiction. And then they moved it to Saturdays, which was even worse for the second season. And the first season I dug a lot more than the second, although there's a number of episodes in the second season I like. I like the one where they time travel back to medieval Scotland. That was a cool episode with a hell of a ticking clock and a hell of a cliffhanger element to it. First season was all Jerry Anderson. Guy did all the puppet shows and UFO, and here he was back with his big budget deal. And but the second season was they brought in Fred Freiberger, who did the third season of Star Trek. This guy specialized in killing off science fiction shows, and he basically ruined the series. But the reason I really like Space 1999 was Martin Landau as Captain Koenig. He out Captain Kirk. I mean, Commander Koenig was the most pragmatic, most cynical, most suspicious science fiction character I've ever seen in my life. There's this episode where at the beginning there's some sort of an accident and he is knocked unconscious. He's like in a coma. And while he's non-compos mentis, these aliens arrive. They're sort of this androgynous male and female fairy type aliens. And they seem very fey and harmless. And everybody on Moonbase Alpha falls in love with them. They think they're terrific. These aliens are the cat's pajamas. And we're really digging hanging out with these aliens. Well, Koenig wakes up and sees these aliens, in the command center, and he pulls out his laser and shoots both of them. He stuns them both, and they fall to the ground. And everybody's shocked and horrified. He's like, but they're great people. We love them. They're our new best friends. and Koenig says, I wanted to make sure our lasers worked on them. And I'm like, it's like, I was sold on the show forever from that point on. I was like, yeah, this dude is badass. I like this guy a whole lot. So I kept on watching. Now, if you're a big Space 1999 fan, you have to find somewhere Spazio 1999. It is an Italian feature film edited together from 2 episodes of Space 1999. It actually showed up in theaters in Italy before the television series. And it has a re-recorded soundtrack by Ennio Morricone. And it's in Italian with English subtitles, but it's really cool. It's really cool to see, and if you're a fan, you got to see it. Ace Mowick. Since you've stated a lot of stuff from the Golden Age was pretty bonkers, and the Bronze Age had a lot of garbage, what would you say were some of the weakest material to come out of the Silver Age, and what would you say were some of Stan Lee's weakest writing from that time that wasn't X-Men? Not trying to put the man down, for the record. There was a little bit of a comic books boom when the Batman series came on. I don't think comic sales went up to any great degree, but a bunch of opportunists and entrepreneurs thought, hey, man, this comic book thing, maybe we should get in and make some money. And a bunch of new comic book publishers popped up out of nowhere. So every time you went to the drugstore, you not only saw new comics, you saw new publishers. It's like, who's this? Thunder Agents? Who the hell are they? But the absolute nadir, and possibly the worst comic ever produced, was this thing called Captain Marvel. Apparently the name Captain Marvel was in some sort of copyright trademark flux, and so this company, whoever the heck they were, some of you comic book historians probably know a lot more about this. They glommed onto this Captain Marvel name and created possibly the lamest superhero ever. His power was that he could make his appendages fly off, which I don't know the point of that. And of course, to make them fly off, he would yell, "Split!" Now, I don't know how his appendages knew which of his appendages he wanted to have fly off. His arms, his legs, his hand, his foot. I don't know, and possibly other appendages we won't mention in mixed company. Kind of weird. Did his head fly off too? I never read enough of them to this is a comic I leafed through at the newsstand, and never bought because it just like this stinks on ice. And if you notice, they came up with this villain for him to fight, his arch nemesis, the Bat, who looks close enough to Batman that he might fool some illiterate child into buying the comic, thinking they were buying a Batman comic. I mean, that's how shameless these people were. And obviously this comic wasn't around long and disappeared. I love the all new. It's a all new crap. Not the same crap we showed you last month. We came up new crap and just artwork, writing. Wow. Now, I'm sorry for any fans of this series that might be out there because, every comic book is someone's favorite comic. But you really need to re-examine your tastes. The other one was really lame, and I tried these a few times, was the Mighty Crusaders from Archie. They tried to, reboot, relaunch these characters in the 60s, and they were, they had some, a great degree of success in the 40s with sci-fi characters. And then they revived them in the 50s. Simon and Kirby did some terrific work with the Shield and the Fly and things like that. But this iteration, not so good. Not so good. And the thing that made it worse was they leaned into camp. Because the Batman series was camp. It was tongue-in-cheek, kind of making fun of itself as it went along. And they sort of leaned into that with this. And I remember they did a paperback collection of these, and the title of the paperback was The High Camp Heroes. So they were really, going for it there. And but those are like the two worst examples I can think of. Now, Stan Lee, Stan Lee's weakest material is probably the stuff that he had like 2 hours to write back in the 50s and early 60s. He was the go-to guy at Atlas and Marvel. And if you read, and I've read a lot of Atlas stuff recently, some horror stuff from the 50s, and, for the most part, none of it makes sense. It's just really bad writing, bad stories with very disappointing twist endings, weak premises, very, very thin plot lines. And, but Stan put his name on the ones he was proud of. He worked quite a bit with like Fred Kita and guys like that. And if he was proud of the story, if he thought, hey, this is a decent one, he put his name on it. And he was totally right. It was okay. It was better than the others. The others were dreck. There's very few diamonds in the rough in the Atlas horror and science fiction comics. But, Stan was there, and, a lot of his stories are 2 pages, 3 pages, 5 pages. And I think, since he was on the spot, and they would go, hey, we're short 2 pages. And he'd spend 30 minutes and whip out some story, based on something that he saw on the way back from lunch. Literally, some of the stories read that way. But in his defense, I got to say, his dialogue was always sharp, and the story had a beginning, middle, and end. And as, as much of a letdown as the conclusions of the stories usually were, you were at least engaged up to that point. And he was also one of the few guys writing at Atlas at that time, other than Hank Chapman, who understood the relationship between comics and cinema, so that he would allow for the stories to be more largely told visually than yak, 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 like so many of the stories were in that period at every company. So there you go. Defendant Stan the man. He's under pressure. He had to hack him out. He just had to. His uncle was like, Stan, you want to keep your job? Get these comics out on time. Joshua Ignatowski, what would you say are some hard-boiled crime stories you enjoy that fall into the more obscure side of things? I'm going to start with Eye of the Beholder by Mark Bem. If you watch these videos, I've talked about Bem frequently. He's one of my favorite writers. Recently, I've been in contact with his son, who's also a writer, and learned a lot more about the man. And thanks to one of the loyal listeners here, I've also been able to read a number of Bem's novels, which were written in French, even though he was an American, translated to English. Most of his novels have never been translated to English. And this gentleman was kind enough to send me some translated, that he translated himself, manuscripts he translated himself, and I enjoyed every one. So Eye of the Beholder is about a private eye who is hired to check into the background of a woman who's fiancée to this wealthy guy. And what he finds out is that she's a killer. She marries rich men and murders them, and then moves on and uses their money, their ready capital, to create a new identity and move to a new place and start over again. Start stalking down some, fat cat billionaire that she can marry and then kill. And the detective follows her and watches her and stalks her and obviously becomes infatuated with her over the course of the novel as she kills one guy after another in exotic locales all around the world. And you reach a point in the novel where you're like, well, when is this guy ever going to close in? When is he going to go to the cops and present his evidence? Where's this story going? And it's the ultimate private eye story because that's it. He just keeps watching her. He never moves in on her. She never faces justice. And it's written in Bem's spare style, not a wasted word. And I really dig it. I mean, I wonder if Bem was a big fan of Albert Camus. Having become an expatriate American living in France, I imagine he was, because he writes in Camus style, very, very terse. Makes Hemingway look long-winded. Another one, I bet you none of you have ever heard of this book. It's called Black Angus by Newton Thornburg. And it's a noir, hard-boiled crime story set in the world of cattle farming. And it's about this guy, I think he's like an advertising exec or something like that, and he's always dreamed of getting off the grid, getting out of the city, and buying a cattle ranch. And he does that. And he changes, it just upends his whole life and his family's life. And he moves out to Montana and he buys himself a few head of cattle. And he's going to raise them, and he hires some folks that know what they're doing to help him out. And from there, it's one disaster after another. You learn a lot about cattle ranching in this. It's fascinating stuff. One disaster after another. He's facing failure. He's facing bankruptcy. And he decides to turn to crime. And I won't reveal what the crime is, but he's pushed into a corner where, as every film noir lead character is, every noir or hard-boiled character is. He's pushed into a corner, and he's got to make that decision, and he makes all the wrong ones. It's a very dark novel and very suspenseful. But, pure hard-boiled stuff, and I'm sure none of you have ever heard of this one. Here's another one. It's a bit obscure. Richard Dooling, Brainstorm. It's mostly about a lawyer, and he's a lawyer. He's a lawyer who specializes in research, and this was early days of the internet. And his specialization is finding information, helping to build cases based on information gleaned from the internet. And he uses various search engines and all. And all this stuff was new when this book was written, and that's his thing. But he lives in a state where every lawyer has to appear in court, has to represent somebody in court at least once a year. So his legal firm assigns him to this case, and it's this dead bang case. You can just plea this guy, to a lesser sentence or whatever. And the case is this guy kills a deaf-mute black man. And this man has been teaching his deaf-mute wife sign language. His wife or his son, I can't remember. So he kills a murder victim who checks all of the DEI boxes. This guy is, black and handicapped. And this guy murders him. And the state decides to put him up for hate crimes. Hate crimes were a new thing at the time. So this lawyer, who has no experience at all in court proceedings, decides to delve into research instead to build his case. And he finds out there's this program that promises to change people's mental outlook using precise laser brain surgery and everything else. Basically turn criminals into honest people. And so he gets his client into this program. And the results are a disaster. It's a terrific book. It's cynical and hard, but really funny in parts. Richard Dooling is a lawyer and a doctor, so he knows both sides of this equation. He knows what he's talking about. But it has some very, very darkly funny scenes. and lots of surprises. I mean, nothing is what it seemed at the end of the book as it was at the beginning. I highly recommend it. This is a book I've read 3 or 4 times. Dueling is sadly not as well known as he should be. Every one of his novels is Critical Care, White Man's Grave. They're all terrific, but this is his masterpiece. Just a work of genius. Twin spin. Yes, Joshua gets a twin spin. He's used to it by now. He doesn't even tell his friends. If you had to take a guess at it, what would you say was the secret to the TV show Seinfeld's writing being so dang good? I think it was the concentration on being funny. Seinfeld insisted the show be funny above all else. You would never see a special episode of Seinfeld. See, generally situation comedies that, they're funny, they're comedies. Once you fell in love with the characters, they realized we have you. You are emotionally invested in the cast of this show. So we're going to do a very special episode of Dear Larry, or Hello Larry, whatever the hell that show was. And we're going to do a very special episode of, the Jeffersons. And while Friends could get away with that, Seinfeld knew he couldn't. His character, which I assume is based on him, was uncomfortable seeing a man sing because the man was emoting. This is a character not comfortable with any kind of emotion. And that was the basis of the show, really. They were funny, but they were also self-centered. These people are all self-centered, petty, jealous. They're not nice people. They hang around each other because they're of a kind. But if you notice on the show, there's not many people welcome into this circle. Because first of all, they don't want them there. And secondly, you wouldn't want to be around these people. They're venal. They're really funny and they're relatable, but they're also, they don't make any effort. They don't make a special effort to make them likable. And all of this is confirmed by the final episode of the series, which a lot of people didn't like, but I thought was genius. Where basically they are put on trial for their personalities, for their horrid personalities, and convicted and put in a jail cell. And the last time we see them, they're all in a jail cell, not having learned a thing, being just as petty and annoying and vindictive and all the rest of it, and shallow as they were from the very beginning of the series. It's absolute genius the way they ended that show. Now, why was the writing always good? Well, you had Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David writing herd on a bunch of writers, and I'm sure they brought in writers who got the tone. And you have to know, there must have been bunches of writers who wanted to write for this show, because who, if you were a regular sitcom writer, why wouldn't you want to write for this show? You'd want your name on a few of these episodes. And I'm sure they rejected these guys in droves because they just didn't get it. They didn't get what the show was about. The gag is that it's a show about nothing, but it really isn't. It's about self-centered New Yorkers and how horrible they are. I mean, remember, a lot of it is a comedy of manners. I mean, things happen and they're embarrassed by something, and instead of just being a full, well-rounded person and just owning up to what embarrassed them, they go to great lengths to hide it, and of course only makes situations worse. I mean, this is farce on a grand scale. And, again, it was about being funny. I mean, there's not a bad season of this show. And they went out on top. Seinfeld realized, okay, we're at the peak. Let's go out now, because, the stuff we're talking about now, we're just kind of starting to feed on ourselves. We're I'm not liking a lot of the new ideas I'm seeing for the next season, so let's just end it. Let's write a final episode and wrap this baby up. And it was a brilliant idea. And an example of Seinfeld's insistence on the show being funny is when all the people they auditioned for Kramer, Michael Richards came in and basically climbed the walls. I mean, just went nuts with the character. And they're sitting there with network execs and everything else, and Seinfeld's sitting there, and they see Richards leave, and Seinfeld told Michael Richards afterwards, he says, "You were the one." I knew as soon as you were done, I'm like, this is Kramer. This is the guy I want. And he goes, but he knew he was cagey enough. He had learned enough. Seinfeld had by this point not to tell that to the executives. And so he said to the one guy, got probably getting paid $1 million a year to run a TV network. What'd you think? The guy says, well, if you want funny. Like this. And Seinfeld's like, biting his tongue. Of course I want funny. What the hell else are we doing here? I want funny. The guy's funny. I want funny. But he didn't say that. He sort of held his opinion back. And just sort of like, worked around the edges until he got Michael Richards signed. Because the other people in the room were not impressed. But Seinfeld saw it. So, and I think that's the secret of it. That you didn't have a committee. In the end, you didn't have a committee running the show. It was Seinfeld and Larry David, and they were holding everybody to a certain standard, a certain level of performance, and all the rest of it. And they built this incredible team, this terrific cast, who interacted. You've never seen a cast this seamless in television. They were absolutely perfect, absolutely perfect. So. Anyway, that's my opinion. Triple spin. And there's the Eagle. Space 1999. Joshua is back, and he wants to know, previously, you had mentioned how CrossGen Digital Comics app was far more innovative than anything we're seeing from publishers today. Mind going into more detail on how they raised the bar ahead of their time? Now, Mark Alessi, who owned CrossGen, was a tech guy. His background was tech. I mean, he financed CrossGen by selling a tech company to Ross Perot for several $1 million. And he unwisely decided to invest in the comic book business. But I'm laughing, but Mark would be laughing with me if he were here. So trust me. Now, Mark had a lot of ideas of how to go beyond just paper comics. He had a lot of ideas about comics. Mainly, he thought they could be of better quality, and he certainly delivered on that. But he thought he kept thinking outside the box to merchandising and film and television, all the rest. Looking at these things as IP potentially could be exploited to make CrossGen a real player across the entertainment space. Ambitious. And the guy was nothing if not ambitious. And one of the things he wanted to do was digital comics, which really was a very, very new thing. You didn't see a lot of that. In fact, I bought Golden Age comics on microfiche, believe it or not. And this was in the 90s, and it was like, there weren't comics on the internet. The internet was so freaking slow, But now as the internet speeds were building up, digital entertainment was becoming a thing. And he had a bunch of tech guys who were very talented, and the best amongst them was Cortland Whitehead. The guy's a tech genius. And basically, Mark gave him a laundry list of what he thought a digital comic could be. And Cortland made it happen. And what made it great was the comics were high def. More so than other people trying to do that. And they were high def enough that they actually marketed DVDs. They put a lot of the digital comics on DVDs and sold them in stores. Eventually they ended up all at dollar stores, but it was a thing. These were comics on DVD. And I should mention that Tony Bedard nicknamed the program Comics on the Moon because he didn't have much faith in it. I didn't have much faith in it either because I knew I didn't want to read digital comics. But Mark realized that too. And he made him and Cortland put together a program that enhanced the reading experience. For one thing, you could touch the screen. If you're reading on a tablet, you could touch the screen and expand word balloons. So you can make the word balloons larger and easier to read, and then shrink them back down. You could take the word balloons off if you wanted. Or you could hit the word balloon and an actor would read the line of dialogue to you. We had this room set aside where actors were recording the dialogue for a lot of these things. And if you can find any of those DVDs, you'll see what I mean. There's actors reading the dialogue, and if you listen real close, and I think it was Scion, you might even hear me playing an old man. I wouldn't have to act now, but anyway. So these were the things that they brought to the table to make it a unique experience, and actually. As in the waning days of CrossGen, Mark was in development with a tablet producing company to make a tablet with a screen the same size as a comic book page, which would enhance it even more. They make you feel closer to holding a comic book in your hand because the size of it would match the trim size of a comic. So close but no cigar on so many things at CrossGen. As I said to Mark, the last few times I saw him, at one point I said, at CrossGen we were rowing hard for the shore. We were rowing all hands on deck, but we just didn't get there. We didn't make it. All the deals that were in play, all the deals that were coming and promised and everything else, they came too late to save the company, or didn't come at all. So, and digital comics is one of them. So, I'm involved with some people now who have developed a really terrific new digital program quite close to CrossGen's, and that looks promising. That would make digital comics more fun and more easy to read than they are now. And hopefully they can interest a whole bunch of independent comics publishers who I've introduced them to get a new digital format off the ground, because Marvel and DC, their digital format is just lies, fallow, hidden at Amazon. As soon as they made the deal with Amazon, I knew the digital comics were going to go away, because Amazon basically invited Marvel and DC into the house, and we'll handle your digital from now on, so that we can eliminate you as competition for our own digital content. Why DC and Marvel couldn't see that, I have no idea. But you can go digital, but you'll want to remain independent. Gentle Savage. Mr. Dixon, you mentioned before that Bane was based on Doc Savage and Man in the Iron Mask. Were there any specific inspirations behind any of the Nightwing villains you created during your Nightwing run? Well, first and foremost would be Dudley Soames, who became the character Torque after Blockbuster turned his head 180. And somehow, miraculously, Dudley Soames survived to have his head on backwards. But his personality and some of the way he talked and everything else was, directly inspired by Dudley Smith, a character in James Ellroy's novel L.A. Confidential, also appeared in the movie, played by John Cromwell. And James Cromwell, I'm sorry. And I very much was like this character. I mean, I created Dudley Soames before the L.A. Confidential movie came out. I created him based off of the novel, which I had read a couple of times. Great novel. And, I wanted a corrupt, driven police, detective, lieutenant. And I like the fact I liked a little bit of an Irish brogue that Dudley Soames had, or that Dudley Smith had, so I kept that. And he basically, in addition to Dudley's first name, has his general demeanor and a little bit of that Irish brogue and Irish phrasing when he talks. But beyond that, he's a far more violent character than Dudley Smith. Terrence James, what's your opinion on AI tools? As you know, we are in the age of AI, and like every new technology, we as a society have to adjust, understand, and adapt in different ways around things. I have heard and seen people make use of it in many ways, but what is your overall opinion of this budding technology in its infancy stages? Do you have any ideas of its potential? Do you have any particular concerns about how some people may use it? And what do you think our country will look like once it's all fully settled in the future? Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts on this one. I'm not so sure we're in the infancy. I think we're in the teenage years of AI, because AI grows so quickly. It's hard to catalog. I mean, if you go on YouTube and you look at AI created videos, and you look at one from 6 months ago and one from yesterday, you can already see the huge marked difference. And it's flooding the zone. It's not even it's a deluge. It's Noah's Ark time. The whole world is flooded with so much AI content, and we can recognize some of it we can't recognize, because it's getting better and better and better. We've all heard read ad copy or heard ad copy on TV or radio or on internet ads that is AI, because they're mispronouncing things, the phrasing is odd and everything else. But all of those glitches are going to go away. And we're already flooded with material. The horrifying truth is there are 1,000 new AI books published a day. A day. Thousands a day. And how does this happen? Well, some guy thinks, oh, I want to write a history of Genghis Khan, but I don't want to write it. So they go to AI and they say, I want a history of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire, and I want it by tomorrow, and I want it to be 40,000 words. He wakes up the next day and there it is. Now, some of it doesn't make sense. A lot of it's completely made up, because AI is a storyteller, and but it's there, and he can go on Kindle Partners and slap that thing on Amazon with a price tag on it. It's for sale. Same thing, little Billy's gonna have a birthday. I'm gonna have AI create a Billy's birthday children's book. So you do it, bim bam. It's not overnight. Put it on Amazon. You buy 20 copies for yourself to give away at Billy's birthday party. And Billy's birthday party book never sells another copy, but it's sitting there on Amazon next to that Erzat's history of Genghis Khan that no one's buying. And now you have hundreds of thousands, 1 million AI produced books sitting on Amazon servers, not moving a single copy. Nobody's buying a print-on-demand paperback. Nobody's buying a Kindle version of it. It had a little spike in sales the first day it was released, as the author bought vanity copies for himself, and that's the end of it. And it's sitting there fallow, taking up room. And this is in a day when Google and Facebook and X and Amazon and everybody else are starved for energy, for their server farms. AI is eating up energy at an incredible rate. It devours it. It needs it. It's starved for it. So you have all of these tech giants investing in coal-fired power plants. They reopened 3 Mile Island, the most notorious nuclear reactor in America. Reopened it. Google bought it and reopened it to power their AI farms, for creating crypto, for creating content. And it's never going to end. Bill Gates went from being an environmentalist to being a proponent of massive energy use, fossil fuel, nuclear, overnight, because he realized his business model needed a zillion gigawatts every hour to keep going. And this is where we are. Now, why am I saying this in relation to AI? Because eventually, Amazon, just to pick one, is going to look at this storage problem they have and go, why are we wasting all this money, time, and energy on a bunch of crap nobody wants? And they're going to start deleting it. They're going to start telling the author of the Erzat's Genghis Khan book, you haven't sold a copy in 6 months. You're out of here. This book's no longer available. We got to flush the system. And generally, I think that's the future of AI. Is as we know, AI steals everything from the internet. It doesn't have a new idea. It doesn't have, unless it's given an idea, it doesn't have an idea. It's a stupid machine. It's not sentient. And so if you ask it to write something, write me a romance novel about pirates, yeah, it'll write it, but it's going to steal from every romance novel about pirates ever written. And then it's out there. It's out there with all the other AI books. Well, we're already seeing that the AI is stealing from other AI, because it doesn't care if the content it's stealing from is created by a human or created by a machine. And so it's a worm or Boros, where AI is feeding more and more and more on itself. And you're going to reach a point of incomprehensibility. This cannot stand. This cannot last. This cannot remain. And I just think it's going to collapse in on itself. And this is going to be true across the board, not just for prose literature or nonfiction books or ad copy, but it's going to spread across TV and movies and everything else, where it's all slop. It's just all slop, and there's nothing new, and there's nothing courageous or different or strong about any of it, or even relatable. A good friend of mine plays around with AI. He's fascinated with AI, and it is fascinating what it can do. And he's playing around with some of his own writing, like rewrite this story in the style of Alexander Dumas, and he does it. And you look at it, and you go, that's pretty damn good. That's pretty damn good. But he asked if he could take one of my comic scripts and turn it into prose. And I said, yeah, let's see what happens. So he feeds it in. It was interesting. It was readable. It was like James Patterson readable. But the AI made choices that I didn't make in my story. Interestingly, I had a scene where a guy tries to pick up a girl and fails. And the point of the scene was to teach you something about him. Learn a little bit more about his personality and everything else to his mawkish attempts to try to pick up a girl. AI took that scene out. It didn't understand it. It didn't understand it because my characters weren't speaking directly to plot. And so I think the AI just thought, well, this is wasted. They're not speaking directly to plot. This isn't advancing the story. It was advancing the story. It was advancing the character's arc. But the AI couldn't see that. And it substituted, in place of that, a conspiracy angle in my story that was not there previously. And the conspiracy angle involved tech. And I'm like, okay, AI is like any other writer. It's writing what it knows. It doesn't understand what I wrote. So it's substituting something that it doesn't understand. Now, it'll become more sophisticated. It has become more sophisticated. Maybe if my friend fed those pages in today, he'd get a completely different result. I can assure you he'd get a completely different result. So, yeah, the future of AI, it's not good. It's not good for anybody. The only areas I see where it's good is like engineering, medicine, law. I can see where AI is a big boon. Any of the sciences, because, it can do things. It is a valuable tool. But from a creative standpoint, I think it's very much a dead end. And we're going to all witness that. Also, it's biased. I mean, we would assume that a sophisticated computing program like AI would be objective. A lot of people, the mythology is that it's subjective. But it's not, because it's been taught to lie. It's had bias fed into it. And we see that. And that is the greatest danger. Because we're already don't believe half of what we see. Now we're not going to believe anything we see. We're going to have it checked. And you go, well, Chuck, if somebody tried to produce an AI image for propaganda purposes to change people's minds, and they create a false image, say of a political leader or a celebrity, we're gonna want to have that checked out. We're not gonna believe that at first. No, you're not, but you saw it. You saw it, and that image is in your head. And if it's a particularly embarrassing, humiliating, compromising image, it's gonna be in your head. And even if it's disproven down the road that this was AI, it's all fake. This person didn't do that. They weren't there doing that. That image is still gonna be in your head. And when you hear that person's name, that image is going to be one of the ones that you reference. Just ask Richard Gere about gerbils. I mean, it's an urban legend, brought to life. And the thing is that eventually, and we can, AI has markers, and you can create an AI image that's very convincing, but it can be taken apart, and we can see it's AI, it can be proven it's AI. Eventually, maybe that won't be the case. Maybe we'll reach a point where you can't prove it's AI. And that's a danger point, because then we have lost all faith. It's the end of culture. It's the end of community. It's the end of it breaks the social contract entirely. If everything we see might be a lie, we're being lied to all the time. Trust me, we're being lied. We didn't need AI for that. But this is different. This is different. And as we know, a lot of people, even when you show them something's a lie, they prefer to believe the lie. As they say, a lie gets around the world before the truth can get its pants on. So, I don't see anything good coming of it unless they rein it in. And I see YouTube now is starting to rein in some of the stuff, saying, we can't keep you from putting this up, but you have to let people know it's AI. We're going to make sure people know this isn't real. Mr. Rogers is not visiting the Battle of ALPHACORE. We're going to label it as AI. So there's that. But we'll see. I hate to see the government get involved there. I'd like to see these outfits self-regulate. Much like the comic book industry once self-regulated itself, and the movie industry self-regulates itself. I would like to see all of these outfits, from fiction publishers to the rest. Because in fiction, it's not even a controversy, which is shocking. There's some best-selling authors. New York Times best-selling authors who have written books using AI and been caught at, by readers because they accidentally left AI markers in the printed books and got called out on it, and there's a bit of a frou-frou about it for a few days, and everybody forgets. And they stay right there on the bestseller market. The public does not abandon them, even though the reading public has now been made aware this wasn't even written by that person. It was written by a program. So, your guess is as good as mine as where all this is going, but I think the road has been paved. I think it's pretty clear to see, at least for a while, it's a pretty dismal prediction. Hey, 3,000 copies sold of ALPHACORE number 2. If you read ALPHACORE number 1, you know that Brian and the officers of ALPHACORE, the super cops, got themselves in a lot of trouble. Everybody's mad at them. Citizens of Forest Park, City Council, their own fellow cops. And in this story, first of the two-parter, we introduce some brand new villains that threaten the existence of Forest Park and the future of ALPHACORE itself. So that's available for pre-order right now. I'll put the link down below, along with the link for the new Great War of Separation number 3, which just dropped yesterday. And if you want to get a hold of me with some awesome questions or complain about the audio, please, as many of you did, please let me know at brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com. It's the most reliable way to reach me. And I want to, I want to thank you all for listening, watching, liking, subscribing, sticking with me through the thick and thin. Your loyalty, even as my audio was painful to listen to, apparently, hugely irritating. Much more irritating than I am on my own audio. And anyway, I want to thank you for that, and hopefully I will see all of you down the road.